take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, September 12th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I am back, literally just 15 minutes back in the studio from Salem, Oregon, our state's capital, where there was a Measure 91 debate. That's right, a debate on our marijuana legalization initiative featuring Representative Earl Blumenauer, my congressman, and Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis, the man who called me a mean, crazy loon. And he actually even mentioned it at the debate. Made a pointed reference about how mean and crazy pot makes people, and looked at me while he did it. It was so adorable. But we've got video from that debate. It just happened at noon Pacific time. We've got the video. We're going to show it to you next here. We're going to do a special edition of the Russ Belville Show and forego our regular news and behind the headlines and drug war data mining segments in order to bring you this debate. And I got to tell you, folks, if Josh Marquis is the best they've got for opposition to marijuana legalization, this thing should be a landslide, folks. It was just sad. Representative Blumenauer really didn't have to do that much to discount Josh Marquis. Josh Marquis did that all on his own. So we're going to run the video here in hour one, and then in hour two, we'll run it again, and I'm going to stop it at time to time to rebut some of the ridiculous reefer madness that Josh Marquis was trying to get over on the Salem City Club audience. Couple of quick highlights from that. Oh, and before I forget, in our activist agenda today, we got a special guest, the man who created this job. The very reason I'm sitting here talking to you now for a living. Chris Goldstein is on our show, one of my all-time heroes and friends. He is currently serving federal probation for his civil disobedience in protesting America's marijuana laws by smoking a joint at the Liberty Bell. In fact, his probation officer is not going to allow him to go to the Boston Freedom Rally this weekend. That's so sad. We'll talk to Chris about that at 5:30. Also, speaking of Freedom Rally, our good friend Herb Thrasher is out there in Boston. He landed at 4:20 Eastern Time. Absolutely. Landed at 4:20 Eastern Time. He's going to be hanging out with rocker Dave Tree to get all sorts of interviews and coverage from the Boston Freedom Rally. We'll have that for you next week here on 420 Radio. But a quick couple of notes from the debate that didn't make it to the video that I'm just stunned these things happen. Number one, Josh Marquis, the leading opponent of Measure 91 here in Oregon, admitted that his wife supports Vote Yes on 91 and wants to grow pot in their greenhouse. Well, we hope we can make that a reality for you, Mrs. Marquis. Also, my colleague Jennifer Alexander asked Marquis afterwards in private where she could get some of her decriminalized pot, because he kept saying, well, it's no big deal. Pot's no big deal. We don't really go after people for pot. Jennifer asked where she should go buy her decrim pot, and he said she should grow it. That's right. The Clatsop County District Attorney told a citizen that she should commit a felony to get her marijuana. And she asked, commit a felony? And he said, well, we don't really go after people that are growing pot in their houses anyway. Yeah, that's the opposition to legalization, folks. With comments like that, it's a guaranteed win, man. So stay tuned. We have got the video from the Salem City Club shot just a few hours ago. Now, it is through Ustream on a 4G wireless, so the video quality is not that great, but you don't really need to see it. You really need to listen to it. Besides, we're radio anyway, right? We're back with the debate right after this. Stick around.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts.
Join us for the International Cannabis Business Conference September 13th and 14th in the Portland Ballroom at the Oregon Convention Center. The International Cannabis Business Conference will focus on the emerging cannabis industry in Oregon, the United States, and around the world, putting you in front of the industry's foremost entrepreneurs, political leaders, and attorneys. Also showcasing over 40 cannabis-related industry exhibitors, offering VIP lunches and free nightly networking events. Prepare yourself for America's next great industry.
Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Rink, the best in late 70s soul, funk, and disco. Every Thursday at 5 and 8 Pacific with 2-hour replays Friday at 10 p.m. Pacific on 4.
Mike Schwab is a former middle school science and math teacher. Currently, he works with children daily as an after-school program leader.
Currently, kids have easy access to marijuana with little understanding of its impact. We can take better care of our kids through Measure 91 with strict regulations and funding for proven marijuana education and prevention programs to keep kids from using it. Under our current marijuana laws, one mistake can ruin a life. Measure 91 removes unfairly harsh punishment for marijuana offenses and gets more tax money to local police and drug prevention. Vote yes on 91.
You can ask them what the schedule is. So, thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce and so, this probably is not a surprise to many of you, but there will be a we care about your opinion.
One forum.
Enjoy the show.
Well, ready or not, Oregon voters, here comes another general election. I suspect some of you have noted subtle clues on your home television set that might be occurring, and we've noticed that also at City Club. As a result, we have planned 8 programs focused on the election. Welcome today to the first of 4 of our Friday noon pre-election sessions, mostly debates, but one forum. In addition to that, we are co-sponsoring with League of Women Voters 3 evening candidate forums for candidates, local candidates for the Oregon House, the Oregon Senate, and the Marion and Polk County Boards of Commissioners. And then on November 7th, I will have a kind of a cleanup hour in which Ed Dover of Western Oregon University will come back for what must be about his 5th encore to summarize the results of the election, not only locally, but statewide and national as well. So we hope you'll be with us for every one of them. Before we get into today's featured attraction, I'd like to plug those next 3 Friday noon programs briefly. 2 weeks from today, on the 26th, we'll have a debate on ballot measure 90. That's the measure that proposes an open or top 2 primary for the state to replace our present primary system. We'll follow on October 10th with a forum. Congressman Kurt Schrader and 3 challengers will be here to discuss issues dealing with the 5th congressional district. And then on October 24th, we'll have a debate on the measure dealing with driver cards for those who can't prove legal residence. You'll find the details, I think, on printed cards up there at your table, and we hope you'll join us for most, if not all, of these. Today, of course, we're going to be treated to a debate of Measure 91, which would legalize recreational marijuana for Oregonians aged 21 and up, beginning in 2016. Any adult would be allowed to possess up to 8 ounces of marijuana and could grow up to 4 plants. It could not be used in public places or by juveniles. The State Liquor Control Commission would regulate its marketing, and there would be a $35 per ounce tax on most marijuana products. As most of you know, the Yes on 91 committee asked Monday to withdraw their previously designated speaker and substitute Congressman Blumenauer. It may be the first time we've ever had a congressman here to debate a ballot measure, but In any event, it represented a change in the original agreement, so we talked to his opponent over here, who very graciously assented to it, and so we've got two very able debaters, and we're looking forward to a terrific debate. We'll be using our standard format today. It's kind of tough on speakers, but I think all of us enjoy it. There are a lot of very restrictive time limits, and I think you've both been briefed on that. For opening statements, you'll be allowed 7 minutes, and Bob Zeigen down here will be timing everything you do and flashing warnings when your time's almost up. After the opening statements, we'll have 2 questions from the chair, and the speakers will have up to 2 minutes each to respond to those. Then they'll have a chance to pose a question to each other. That often is the highlight of the debate, of course. And finally, the formal part of the debate will close with their closing remarks for up to 2 minutes each. Then we'll open it up to audience questions, and as Cindy said, giving preference to City Club members will be first in line for those, and we want brief questions, not speeches. So let's, without any further preliminaries, let's introduce the speakers, and the introductions will be very brief, and we'll not do either one of them justice. But the first speaker, representing the advocates for the measure, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, has represented Oregon's 3rd Congressional District in the Portland area for the past 17 years. He served in the Oregon House back in the 1970s. Subsequent to that, he was a member of the Blumenauer County Board of Commissioners and the Portland City Council prior to his election to Congress in 1997. He's been a leading voice for several years in efforts to legalize marijuana. Joshua Marquis has been District Attorney of Clatsop County at Astoria since 1994. He's been a longtime leader of the District Attorneys of Oregon, especially active in opposition to the legalization of recreational marijuana. The press quotes him frequently on this subject, and he comes with recommendations of a number of law enforcement folks. So with that, Mr. Blumenauer, why don't you select yours?
Thank you very much, Bill. It's really a pleasure to be here today. Actually, I had this wave of nostalgia as I come in, because I've spent actually more time in Salem because of my legislative service and other activities than any other city other than my hometown Portland or now Washington, D.C. Is it really 17 years? That's scary. And it's also a wave of nostalgia because of the subject that we're talking about here today. 41 years ago, down the street, I was part of a debate in the Oregon legislature that was led by self-described conservative hog farmer from Eastern Oregon, the incomparable Stafford Hansel. It was still the most compelling case I've heard, as this teetotaling non-smoker explained the facts, how marijuana was less addictive and damaging than tobacco and alcohol use, which were perfectly legal. What Stafford said then has subsequently been confirmed. The Institute of Medicine did a study. 32% of tobacco users develop dependence. 23% of heroin users. 17% of cocaine users. 15% of alcohol drinkers become dependent. Only 9% of marijuana. That's why Stafford made this brilliant speech. And I was told that if the 19 of us who voted for it had been joined by the people who voted against it but smoked dope, it wouldn't have happened. Stafford's presentation resonated for me in all seriousness. My father's life was damaged by the alcohol he drank, causing problems for him and his family. And the cigarettes that he was addicted to killed him. After being out of my life for a number of years, he came back with late-stage cancer. And I watched him die in my living room, smoking until almost he could no longer draw a breath. I become even more committed as a consequence of our failed policy of marijuana. The prohibition doesn't work, and the consequences more and more clear. It's an expensive failure. To arrest, cite, fine, jail, cost huge sums of money. upwards of $8 to $9 billion nationally at all levels, money that you pay, to say nothing of the lives that are wrecked, especially for young people of color, African Americans, who are nationally about 4 times more likely to be arrested than white young men, even though they smoke at the same rate. And frankly, for these vulnerable young men, even an arrest or a fine that they cannot afford can start them down a path of failure and frustration, which too often leads to a real life of crime. Illegal marijuana markets funds big enterprises, drug cartels, gangs, who are ruining our forests and public lands while they pollute our neighborhoods, our parks, schoolyards, and public spaces selling drugs. It's failing our children. No one thinks it's harder for a 13-year-old girl to buy a joint than a 6-pack of beer. No drug dealer checks for identification. No drug dealer has a license to lose. And in fact, that drug dealer would probably want to sell her a new pill or some powder that will enrich his business. We're breeding disrespect for the law. It's not healthy for the millions who break the law every day, every month, for a law we have neither the will nor the means to enforce. It undermines the credibility of our anti-drug efforts. I've had experts sit before me in congressional hearings and be unable to answer a simple question. How many people died of a marijuana overdose last year? Spoiler alert, 0. Is it true that methamphetamines are more dangerous, are less dangerous than marijuana? They can't give a straight answer. It doesn't have to be this way. We should legalize marijuana, regulate it, and tax it. I strongly urge all of you here, after you hear the back and forth, and you'll see some ads, read the measure. It will answer many of your questions and dismiss many of the false claims that people who are crusading against it claim. Instead of wasting your tax dollars on a failed policy of prohibition, we can generate millions of dollars a year to help improve our state. 40% of the revenues are dedicated to education. 35% for law enforcement, who can concentrate on real problems. And 25% for drug treatment, prevention, and mental health, which is a real problem and grossly underfunded. Now, the estimates I've seen, the lowest is $16 million a year for the first year. But whatever, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, the fact is there will be very substantial savings because we're no longer citing, arresting, and jailing. And there are other aspects. Consider hemp cultivation. You can get hemp products in any city in Oregon. They're sustainable. Lots of us like them. It's just that it's now not possible for Oregon farmers and ranchers to grow it. We've got an opportunity for serious consumer protections in packaging. Right now, there are thousands of people that get marijuana products legally in Oregon. They have no idea what they're getting, to say nothing of the thousands that buy it illegally. We've got an opportunity here to make a difference. Let me be clear. I don't want to promote marijuana. Unlike many of the people I've debated over the years, I've never used it. I don't want my grandchildren to be part of the 30,000 12 to 17-year-olds who use it in the last month. That's why I support Measure 91. To legalize, tax, and regulate. Don't force 1/3 of a million Oregonians who use almost 1/3 of a million to become criminals. And let's concentrate on getting it out of the hands of kids and be able to put that money to more productive use. I really look forward to our conversation today. Thank you for allowing me to be with you.
Thank you. It's great to be back here. I was here 2 years ago talking about the last legalization measure. And I like Congressman Blumenauer, urge you to read it. It's a pretty dizzying mix of things. And let me make a couple differences between myself and Congressman Blumenauer, although we've actually known each other and have some common friends as people involved in politics. I have used marijuana. It's been a long time, about 40 years. I did inhale. And when I was at the University of Oregon in the early 1970s, it sold for about a lid. Most of you over 60 or 55 would know what that is. That was about an ounce. It sold for about $10 to $15 an ounce. And the decriminalization of marijuana in this state, to what, with all due respect, the legislature didn't start in Salem. It started in Eugene, Oregon, with the guy I was working for at the time, Pat Morton, a tough on crime, tough as nails DA. It was one of those Nixon goes to China moments. And what he said back then, the law was if somebody was caught with a single joint of marijuana, and at the time the THC level was about 2%. To give you an idea, it now runs anywhere from 20 to 80%. And frankly, since I smoked it, I can tell you had to smoke most of a joint to get high. And marijuana sold for $10 an ounce. Now it sells for $200 to $600 an ounce. And Morton's concept was it's ridiculous to make felons. People weren't going to prison in Oregon. Now they may in other states. But they still were becoming felons, which might mean they couldn't become doctors, lawyers, morticians, whatever. And he said this is ridiculous. And he led the move. Oregon was the first state to do it. I believe the legislature passed it in 1973. It never would have happened but for law enforcement stepping up. Who has supported the decriminalization of marijuana for 40 years? Oregon's district attorneys. There was a move in 1997 to recriminalize it as the marijuana became more and more potent, and we said no. So one of the biggest misrepresentations you're hearing from, to be blunt, Congressman Blumenauer on the other side is, it's a crime. We are criminalizing it. Well, there's arrests and citations. The Oregonian called this claim false in PolitiFact 3 weeks ago. Here's the point. The point is in Oregon, there are about 12,000 marijuana-related incidents with the police a year. Over 10,000 of those are citations. Anybody here ever get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket? Raise your hand. Okay, you got a speeding ticket, you didn't go to jail, you didn't get a free ride in a police car, you didn't have a criminal record. That's what less than an ounce of marijuana is in Oregon and has been for 40 years. So you can't just glibly say arrest and citations. And Congressman Blumenauer passionately believes, and there are parts of this country where disenfranchisement, where a felony record can haunt you the rest of your life. Let me tell you the facts about disenfranchisement in Oregon. In Florida, 17% of the population is African American, yet 25% of African Americans are disenfranchised because of a felony. That's really alarming. In Oregon, we're a much less diverse state. To be blunt, look at the audience. There's not very many people of color here. The population, African American population, is 3%. You know what the disenfranchisement rate in Oregon is? 2.5. It's actually lower than the overall representation of African Americans. So let me just try something here. There's 14,600 people in prison in Oregon. Sir, I'm going to pick on you right there with the blue blazer. You've heard about the war on drugs. How many people do you think are in prison out of that 14,600 for marijuana? Just give me a guess.
Yeah, I'd say 1,000.
1,000, yeah. Actually, there's just over 1,000 people in Oregon's prisons for all drug offenses, mostly selling heroin. Oregon has the second lowest imprisonment rate of the United States for drugs. I think only Vermont is lower. The number of people in prison for marijuana in Oregon is less than 100. The fact of the matter is that I doubt if we spend $2 million a year in the state of Oregon enforcing marijuana laws. And I'd ask you to look carefully at this because A, it allows the OLCC under the jurisdiction of Cover Oregon. You know, how did that work out? I got ahead of myself. The Oregon Health Authority, the people that brought you Cover Oregon. Now, I'm from the government, but when someone says, I'm from the government, trust me, we'll work it out, I just ask you to look at Cover Oregon. I mean, that did not work out well. If you look at the measure, you'll notice that there really are no regulations. There's nothing that says you... I was in Denver recently. There are 600 retail marijuana stores in Denver. The only difference between medical marijuana, which, by the way, would coexist with this, there's 65,000 medical marijuana card holders, and under Oregon law, they may possess a pound and a half at any one time. And God forbid they should get down to just a pound, which is about $4,000, where they can restock that other half pound. Now, I think you could probably stay completely gorked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 6 months on a pound and a half of marijuana. I don't doubt that marijuana has some legitimate uses. 10 years ago, I wrote an op-ed in the Oregonian urging marijuana to be descheduled so that doctors could prescribe it, because it clearly does have some medical use. On the other hand, the proponents of this measure would not just have you believe that marijuana isn't dangerous, that it's beneficial. So under this, I say I only have a minute left. Two quick points. One, why is it not okay for Monica Wiebe to bring millions of dollars of dark money in from the Koch brothers? I think most of us are offended by that. But yet millions of out-of-state dollars are what's funding Measure 90. And the other thing is, look carefully at this measure, because it not only allows you to have half a pound of marijuana if you're an adult, you can also have a pound of edibles, you can also have a gallon of marijuana liquid, you can also have an ounce of hashish, and you can grow 4 plants. And as the Oregonian pointed out, growing 4 plants indoor takes up about the same amount of electricity as 29 refrigerators. That's not very economical, and I look forward to, within the confines of the time, to answering more questions and making more points. So thank you.
We'll continue with the Measure 91 debate at the Salem City Club. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have Chris Goldstein Chris Goldstein will be joining us and telling us about what's happening in his current federal probation for his civil disobedience in Philadelphia. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org. We'll be back with Chris Goldstein, and we'll finish up the question and answer section of the debate at the end of the show.
I don't use marijuana, but as a teacher of 36 years, I can tell you lots of other people use it. I don't believe in prohibition. I don't think it works. Prohibiting it hasn't stopped anybody from getting a hold of it. I would like to see it regulated so that maybe kids can't get a hold of it so easily. I know they get a hold of it now very easily. I support a new approach to marijuana. I support legalizing it. It's with us. It's not going to go away. And if we can get money through the taxation, we can also educate our kids about it. That's why I support it.
There's so much I worry about as a mom. Stephen Harper thinks that organized crime should continue to profit from marijuana prohibition. Imagine regulating marijuana like alcohol and cigarettes with a strong and clear educational message, making it more difficult for my kids and your kids to access. Drug dealers don't ask for ID. Stephen Harper does not have the kind of judgment we need to protect our children, authorized by the normal.
My name's Tara Selzen, and I've worked in environmental conservation for many years. I'm a big supporter of Measure 91 because our current marijuana laws have failed us. We have the opportunity this fall to vote to support legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana in Oregon. There are many obvious reasons for reforming marijuana here in Oregon. There are over 12,000 arrests and citations each year. That's one every 45 minutes. I think those are the wrong priorities for our public safety. And there are also many other unintended consequences that come with the current system. By treating adult marijuana use as a crime, we're forcing those who grow marijuana to exist in the black market. That means they go out into our natural areas, wilderness, and forests to grow marijuana. These illegal marijuana grows pose a serious environmental problem because they don't belong in our forests and natural areas. They remove vegetation, they harm our habitat, and they hurt wildlife. Regulated marijuana would be grown like normal crops, but illegal marijuana growers are tapping into our fragile creeks and streams and actually dry them up. It's not just outdoor marijuana growing that poses a threat to our environment. Illegal indoor growing does as well. Because they can't take advantage of energy conservation programs, indoor growing wastes a tremendous amount of power. There are a lot of reasons to support regulating marijuana with Measure 91. Protecting our environment is one of them.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. Half past the hour here on a beautiful Friday where there's all sorts of activities taking place on both coasts with respect to marijuana legalization. This weekend, we've got the International Cannabis Business Conference right here in Portland, Oregon. And on the opposite side of the country, we've got the Boston Freedom Rally going on in Boston, Massachusetts. And one of my favorite people working for marijuana legalization out there in the New England area is my good friend Chris Goldstein, who's on the phone with us. Chris, how you doing?
Hey, doing great, Russ. Great to hear your voice, man.
It's great to hear you too, but I got to believe this is the least high I've ever talked to you.
Federal probation has me on sobriety alert, as a matter of fact, and I know you've been kind enough to actually smoke all the marijuana that's been given for me, but also I've been putting my marijuana on layaway, Russ. So hopefully once this probation's over, I'll hit my layaway marijuana plan.
There we go, the Kmart of marijuana. That sounds great. For folks who don't know, Chris is an activist and a radio producer who's been working for a long time, well over 10 years in the industry. He basically created the job that I'm doing right now. And what landed you in the federal probation hot water was exercising liberty at the Liberty Bell. Why don't you tell folks about that?
Yeah, indeed. It's important for people to know, this week we had some major leaps forward in the city of Philadelphia, but federal law and federal possession penalties can net you up to 5 years of probation, up to 6 months in jail, and up to a $5,000 fine. And for half of a joint, for 0.4 grams of marijuana, the U.S. attorney took me to court and convicted me of that awful possession there. And I ended up getting 2 years of federal probation and a $3,000 fine for being one of the loudest Quakers in Philadelphia. So I'm serving my term.
You know, you must be mistaken, because every time I talk to the drug warriors, they say they don't really go after pot smokers on the federal level.
Oh, yeah, only if you come out and actually, challenge the law, Russ. Yeah, as long as you're a quiet pot smoker and you're there in your house and you don't actually fight for legalization, sure, then maybe they won't come after you. But the minute you actually start challenging the law and the minute you start putting it in the face of authorities and telling them how absurd these prohibition policies are, bam, they're willing to enforce the law.
Yeah, and you were also brought down with your colleague there, N.A. Poe, from the Panic Hour, I believe it is. How is his situation right now?
He got less probation. He only got a year, and he's up in December. Actually, the co-defendant who was with me in the case is Don DeZarn.
Oh, yes.
And, he's made some national news because Princeton University has decided to tell Don, this is a really interesting case, Russ, because Don and I were convicted at the same time. We were co-defendants at trial. But the judge in our case, and you got to give him some credit here, the federal judge allowed...
Oh, we got a connection issue going on here. Just lost you there, Chris. Still there? All right, we seem to have a dead connection there. I'm going to try to hang up and redial the connection. But yeah, Don DeZarn and Chris Goldstein, both sentenced in federal court. U.S. attorneys went after him and got the probation here. This case in Princeton involves Mr. DeZarn trying to work as a professor there, and Princeton University wanting to deny him any ability to work there because of his involvement with marijuana reform. We'll try to get Chris Goldstein back on the line here to be able to discuss this. Also, we have in Philadelphia, if you've been following the news where Chris is located, in Philadelphia, they have recently agreed, the mayor, Michael Nutter there, has agreed to sign on to the marijuana decriminalization measure that was passed by a 13-3 veto-proof majority in the city council, so long as they added a $100 public smoking fine. So $25 fine for possession, $100 for public smoking. That should go into effect later this year. Mayor Nutter was very much against such a thing, and I think we got Chris back on the line. Chris, I was just filling him in on the Mayor Nutter and the decriminalization that just passed there in Philly.
Yeah, it's a big deal. This is decriminalization for 1.6 million people here in the city of Philadelphia, and it's been a long, hard effort by a lot of folks here, but Philly Normal, Derek Rosenzweig and I have been highlighting and reporting on the marijuana arrests for many years using the Uniform Crime Reporting System. And that really seems to be what moves city councilors and the mayor and even the police to adopt a new policy. The fact that we have such a stark racial disparity to arrests in Philadelphia is something that really inspired this change.
Yeah, and we've seen how the racism is inherent in these arrests in Philadelphia. What was it, 83, 88% African American?
It is. It's 83% African American. But then, you know, what it was, Russ, is last year I started doing comparisons to other drugs, and I found that, you know, heroin and cocaine arrests are actually racially equal in Philadelphia, literally 50-50. And the other strange thing was that when it comes to enforcement on the sales manufacturer side, they arrest about half as many people for selling marijuana as they do possessing marijuana. But when you look at heroin and cocaine, those arrests are equal. They arrest about an equal amount of people for selling as they do as possessing. So finally, Philadelphia, you know, we had a really harsh policy here, literally handcuffs and a holding cell for any amount of weed. You know, if you heard about those two Steelers who got pulled over in a car with marijuana out in Ross Township, Pennsylvania, they were not put in handcuffs. They were mailed a summons, you know, and most of Pennsylvania actually deals with minor possession like that. That's why it was so important that we made this change. I mean, 4,300 arrests a year, and when we're talking arrests, we're not talking a summons into court. We were talking handcuffs and holding cells. So this is a major shift for Philadelphia, and I have to give a big shout-out to everybody at Philly Normal who's been working on this for many years, and also the ACLU of Pennsylvania, who were just instrumental in getting this through.
Now, you said in the rest of Pennsylvania, most of them handle it with a mail-in kind of summons situation, but in Philadelphia, had they the ability to do that and just chose not to?
It seems like that, Russ. Yeah, state law doesn't say you have to perform a custodial arrest, but the Philadelphia Police Department and the city administration took it upon themselves to default to custodial arrest 100% of the time, and that's how they use their discretion, unlike the rest of the officers in the state. So that's what was really, you know, we've been talking with the mayor's administration and the DA and the police department for years, trying to get them to change that policy on their own. So, you know, really thankful to Councilman Jim Kenney and the rest of the city councilors, 13 of them, who voted for this in a supermajority and really recognized the problem for what it is.
So pending Mayor Nutter's signature on this, I mean, when are we expecting this will go into effect?
The police department says that they're going to implement this by October 20th, Russ, and that's good news, too, because the mayor had sort of gone out on the clock for the full 90 days for his consideration over the summer, and that meant about 1,000 people actually were still custodially arrested. So having this in place by October 20th is going to be a major deal. Again, there's about 360 black men per month put into handcuffs right now in Philadelphia, so if we can stop that sooner than later, that really has an impact on people's lives.
All right, let's shift gears from Philadelphia and look statewide, where at the Capitol there's been discussion of medical marijuana. And I got to get this straight from you, Chris, because half the time I hear people saying it's a CBD-only bill, and then other people say, no, it's whole plant. What's the status of medical in Pennsylvania right now?
Yeah, I think, you know, you're expressing the confusion amongst legislators who some of them think that they're passing a kind of a CBD-only bill. But the language of SB 1182 is very clear. It's a whole plant cannabis law, and it's pretty innovative. It would be far less restrictive than what we saw in New York, New Jersey, Delaware. It would have county dispensaries. It would also have separate licenses for growing. And in a kind of innovation, it would also put nurses in charge of the dispensaries and allow nurse practitioners to actually recommend medical marijuana. Of course, the big question is, will we get this done in time? General Assembly of Pennsylvania has a 2-year legislative cycle that flips over in January. We've got a gubernatorial election happening November 4th, and this legislature doesn't usually come back for a lame duck session. So everything's kind of got to happen between Monday, September 15th, and November 4th, Election Day. It looks like it's going to pass the Senate, Russ. I think that's very clear. We have clear support amongst a majority of senators. We have unanimous passage out of a Senate committee this year. But going over to the House, we've had a lot more opposition. And, of course, the current governor, Tom Corbett, has all but promised a veto of medical marijuana. You never know what's going to happen there as well. But, you know, there's a Democratic challenger, Russ. His name is Tom Wolf, and he supports decriminalization. He is a strong supporter of medical marijuana. So if it doesn't happen this year, we're almost sure to see it happen next year in Pennsylvania.
Governor Corbett's made some noise about that he might be supportive of one of those CBD only just for the epileptic kids type of bills. If that's the case, do you think that supporters may negotiate and try to do CBD only, or are they going to push to keep it whole plant?
I have to give a lot of credit to Lolly Myers and Dana Ulrich, who are part of this campaign for compassion in Pennsylvania. These are parents of kids who have Dravet and serious seizure disorders. They do not want to see a CBD-only bill. I think that they have seen what's happened in Iowa and Illinois and other states with these so-called CBD-only laws, and they realize that a whole plant cannabis law is what's going to benefit their kids and benefit the rest of patients in Pennsylvania the best. We have strong advocates here, Senator Mike Fulmer, Senator Dalen Leach. They are really behind this. And, of course, we had Irvin Rosenfeld bring his whole plant cannabis into the committee hearings just a few months ago. So I think that there's a clear idea that we want a whole plant cannabis law. One of the good things is that some of the senators have said during the hearings, we don't want to be like New Jersey. And recognizing the restrictive nature of some of these laws, the fact that they're so restrictive that nobody gets any marijuana and nobody gets any CBD oil, for that matter, I think it's important. But you're right. It was a congressman from Pennsylvania, Rick, he is the guy that put up a congressional CBD-only law. And honestly, Russ, I look at the CBD-only laws as political subterfuge. They don't actually get medicine to patients. They don't really benefit anybody. They just let politicians look compassionate without actually changing the law.
Yeah, absolutely. We're speaking with Chris Goldstein, and he's active with so many groups, I'm not sure which one to highlight first. Do you want to give people some contact information, websites where they can get more information?
Well, definitely check out phillynormal.org, phillynorml.org. That is the group that we've just been working so hard for the last 6 years to get this decriminalization policy through here in Philadelphia. It is, people are saying it's the biggest city in the country to do it, and that's about right. And it is a major impact. So check us out at phillynormal.org. And Russ, we've got a new magazine called Freedom Leaf Magazine that I was just hired on as associate editor, and that's going to be a free magazine going out to Normal and SSDP chapters, so everybody can take a look out for that in October.
Awesome information. And also follow Chris on Twitter at Freedom is Green. We're always online. And hey, when do you get to smoke pot again?
Looks about 500 days, but my lawyer says that in March of this year, he's going to file a motion to cut down on my probation if I behave correctly and I don't fail any drug tests or rob any banks or anything like that. It looks like the second year of my 2-year sentence might be suspended, and I'll be able to go back to a much more normal life. and if I get this right, they're not going to let you go to the Boston Freedom Rally? That's correct. Federal probation officials assume they didn't let N.A. Poe go either. You know, we did the Boston Tree Party last year with everybody there, with you. And apparently the federal authorities are clear that nobody will smoke marijuana in public as long as Rich and I aren't there. I think they're going to be pretty surprised when 50,000 people do just that at the Boston Freedom Rally this weekend.
All right. We'll have some footage from Herb Thrasher in this weekend's events at the Boston Freedom Rally. Chris Goldstein, thanks for everything you're doing. And believe me, we're cooking up a big, huge, fat Oregon bomber for you when you're finally able to use it.
I look forward to it, Russ. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. All right, folks, when we come back, we've got the conclusion of the Salem City Club debate between Representative Earl Blumenauer and Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis on Measure 91. We go to the question and answer section next.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, your ticket to Seattle Hemp Fest. Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Hey, Ellen, want a hit? Want to smoke a joint before trying this on?
Here you go, Ellen. You want to get high? We got some great high stick in the back.
Smoke. Kind buds. Sexy. You're gonna love this stuff. It'll get you really high.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. I'm Radical Russ Belville, and I want to thank you for listening to 420 Radio. We couldn't survive without you and our sponsors, and I'd like you to check out one of our prime sponsors, the National Cannabis Coalition. I've been working with NCC since June of 2012, and I'm proud to be part of the team they have assembled. National Cannabis Coalition is building the partnerships with reformers, lawmakers, and industry we need to be successful. Visit the National Cannabis Coalition website at nationalcannabiscoalition.com or the easier-to-remember ncc420.com. That's where you'll get the exclusive first look at my radical rants, as well as informative articles from the nation's top cannabis pundits. Visit ncc420.com today, and if you have your phone handy, text Russ to 420-420 to support NCC and 420 Radio. It's a free text message that helps us help you end adult marijuana prohibition. Learn more at ncc420.com, and thanks for supporting independent marijuana legalization public radio.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs. I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality in general.
How in the century you have slurred the meaning of the words we, the people.
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Welcome back, everybody. 48 after the hour, and we're going to return to Salem, Oregon. Earlier this afternoon, there was a Measure 91 marijuana legalization debate that featured Representative Earl Blumenauer on the pro side and Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis on the con side. They've already concluded their opening remarks, and we now move to the segment of the debate that features questions for each other, questions from the chair, and questions from the audience.
And now we have a couple of questions here from the chair.
If you please.
Thank you both, and now we have a couple of questions here from the chair. The first one will be directed to Mr. Blumenauer first, and then Mr. Marquis, and we'll reverse the order for the second question. What are the pros and cons of the specific limits placed on marijuana by the various states? For example, Oregon would allow possession of 8 ounces, while Washington allows 1 and Colorado 1. Oregon would allow adults to grow 4 plants, while Washington allows 0 except to licensed growers. In Colorado, 6 plants. Does any of this matter?
Well, if you believe.
Is it working?
Okay. Well, if you believe Mr. Marquis, we're not really enforcing it anyway, so it doesn't. My feeling is we're in the midst of a process that where Washington and Colorado are moving forward. They're experimenting. So far, the rollout has been relatively smooth. The sky hasn't fallen. We have a different approach here. It's not frozen in the Constitution, so we'll have an opportunity to take further notice of what happens in those 2 states, look at what we do, make adjustments going forward. The bottom line here is that marijuana is widely available now. We just don't know what people have. There's no product safety. There's no tamper-proof packaging. There's no research into what it is. And this will be a step forward to be able to have a regular marijuana market. And I'm absolutely convinced that in the course of the next 10 years, this is going to be adopted across the country, not just for the 23 states that have adopted medical marijuana and another 11 that have some aspect of it. But I think we will deschedule it nationally, and states will be able, like they do with alcohol, to make their own rules and regulations. And people from time to time will be able to adjust based on what works and what doesn't. This is uncharted territory now because it's widely available. Any of you could get a joint in a matter of minutes. Now, I frankly didn't take the risk that Mr. Marquis took and hope that he didn't get arrested and then not be able to be an attorney. But you could do it if you wanted. What we want to do is be able to take the Wild West that's funding drug cartels, that's shady elements, and be able to turn it into a legitimate, tax-paying, regulated enterprise, not the Wild West.
Thank you. Mr. Marquis, can you hear me?
I don't think this is working. I'll just try to speak loudly. Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, for one thing, one of the reasons that at age 19 I was so reckless is I had absolutely no fear that the Eugene police were going to bust in my door and get me. And 41 years later, I think people are even less worried about it. The point is that all this business about all the lives are going to be ruined, the police are going to break in your door, that it didn't happen in 1975, it didn't happen in 1985, and it's definitely, now maybe it's happening someplace where Congressman Blumenauer is hearing about Florida, but it isn't happening here. Again, people are generally shocked when they find out how people in my office, I'm a medium-sized office, I filed out of 1,400 cases, 500 felonies, 3 marijuana cases last year, and they all went to prison. So if this thing passes, I ain't going to get a dime. I'm not going to lose any staff. I'm not going to gain any. I don't take campaign contributions from either pharmaceutical companies or from groups that are big marijuana that is going to become corporate marijuana. The very same people. The Congressman Blumenauer is saying, oh, they're sort of, they're Wild Western cartels. Many of those are the same people that are setting up these stores. And if you think Oregon medical marijuana is closely regulated, you'd be wrong. There's 65,000 cardholders in Oregon. I would bet everybody in this room is eligible to have a medical marijuana card. And by the way, that law will continue to exist. So, Mr. Blumenauer says, why does it matter? If it's so available, why do I care about this? Well, I usually debate the death penalty and mandatory sentencing. I have never seen people get so angry about any subject of marijuana. And I hope that marijuana doesn't make people that mean and crazy, because I thought it mellowed people out. But the fact of the matter is that the reason it matters, I don't care if adults go and smoke marijuana at home. I really have no interest. But if you flood the market, if you let everybody grow 4 plants, every adult, if you do all of this else, what's going to happen? You are going to have a huge trickle down to kids. I only care about 2 things. I don't want people driving under the influence, and I don't want children getting it. If you took the price of soda pop and dropped it to 10 cents a bottle, what do you think would happen? More people would get using it.
time? Okay, the next question will go first to Mr. Marquis. Please try to look ahead 5 or 10 or 20 years. If voters legalize recreational marijuana, what resulting changes would you expect in marijuana consumption?
Soda pop and dropped it to 10 cents a bottle. They're sort of, they're Wild West. There are a lot more people using it. I mean, it's like any other product. It would be legitimate. Anybody could purchase it who was over 21. Doesn't matter if you're a convicted child molester. You're not disenfranchised from possessing it. It would, just as alcohol, I mean, what are the two worst drugs in our society? I would agree with Congressman Blumenauer. They're alcohol, which is far more toxic than pot, and tobacco, which is far more addictive. Well, what's happened? Oh, we tax it. And how's that worked out for us? We have billions of dollars of healthcare costs associated with tobacco use, and we have billions of costs. I'm a prosecutor. The most dangerous drug I deal with is alcohol. So why on earth would we want, as the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse says, I don't really care about marijuana, but what's going to happen? You are going to enlarge the markets, enlarge the number of people who have access to it, particularly kids. And there is substantial research that says you don't want kids with developing brains of 15, 16, 17 years old to be regular users of marijuana. Now, are they going to turn into reefer madness fiends because they have a joint? No, they're not. But as Congressman Blumenauer says, this is an experiment. And why, and I'm sorry, but you may live in a different political reality. I go all around the United States speaking to groups not about marijuana, but if you look at a map of the United States, there's this blue strip that goes down Oregon, another blue strip down the East Coast, and a couple blue off, and then there's this sea of red. And if you think in South Carolina or North Dakota or Nebraska, they're about to legalize marijuana, well, I won't say you're smoking something, but I think it's highly unrealistic.
I think what will happen over the course of the next 5 or 10 years is that we will be treating this in a thoughtful and responsible fashion. Now, according to Mr. Marquis, it's widely available, nobody gets prosecuted, so there are no checks and balances now. Although there are, in fact, people in jail and in prison for it. But if you take the assumption that it's just widely available, what's different is in 5 or 10 years, first of all, people will know what they get. You don't know what you get now, even for medical marijuana. Second, we will have more resources to deal with law enforcement and with drug addiction and education. Third, we can stop the hypocrisy pretending that marijuana is some serious, deadly scourge for the country. Mr. Marquis agrees that tobacco and alcohol are worse. They kill more people, they're more addictive. But what's happened? When I was in high school, smoking was widely accepted. For kids, for adults, both my parents, as I mentioned, my father. What's happened over the last 40 years? Well, we didn't lock up people who smoke cigarettes. What we did is we exposed the tobacco industry for the lives that they had. We started to regulate the product, and we taxed the dickens out of it. And that's had a huge difference in terms of youthful smoking, which is at a lower level than any time since we've been keeping track of it. And that's what we can and should do with marijuana. Educate, regulate, and tax it. Focus on the drug dealers and this underground black market. Get the cartels out of it and treat it responsibly, like we've done with tobacco and alcohol.
Thank you both very much. Now you get to go at each other. The rules are you each have 1 minute to pose a question to your opponent. He has 2 minutes to respond, and you have 1 minute to rebut. And so you're first, I think, Mr. Blumenauer. The floor is yours.
I wonder if you'd be kind enough to outline what you and your office have done and are doing to create a prescription drug epidemic in your
Congressman Blumenauer points out that prescription drug abuse is a huge problem. Actually, many of the vehicular homicides, and in fact, the most recent vehicular homicide my office prosecuted had the presence of oxycodone, which also known as marketed as OxyContin. We treat prescription drug